Good day everyone, my name is Rhouela Francisco and today I'll be presenting validity. In language test construction, we do not directly proceed to evaluating our students without first taking into account the things that should be considered in language assessment. The most important criterion of an effective test, and arguably the most important principle, is validity. The general concept of validity is that our test should be aligned to our objective. A valid test measures exactly what it proposes to measure. It does not measure irrelevant or contaminating variables. It involves performance that samples the test's criterion or objective. It offers useful, meaningful information about the learner's ability. There are three types of validity. The first type is criterion-oriented validity, which includes predictive validity and concurrent validity. The second type is content-related validity, and the third type is construct validity. The first type of validity is criterion-oriented validity, in which by definition means the extent to which the criterion of the test has actually been reached, meaning if the standard of the test has been met, then the test is valid. Criterion-oriented validity has two subtypes. The first is predictive validity. The term is used when the test scores are used to predict some future criterion such as academic success. So from the word itself, predict, we are going to use this certain criterion or criteria to predict something in the future. For example, you're going to use the student's ability to cope in order to figure out whether or not they can read and understand the lectures and be able to do their assignments. Here, we ask the question, do the result of the test successfully predict the outcomes that they are supposed to predict? The next subtype is concurrent validity. The term is used if the test scores are used to predict a criterion at the same time the test is given. Suppose my reading test is very long, and for practical reasons, it needs to be much shorter. So in this example, we would like to ask if the shorter task can replace the longer test and still be useful. So that is an example of concurrent validity. Now, if a test actually samples the subject matter about which conclusions are to be drawn, and if it requires test taker to perform behavior that is being measured, it can claim content-related evidence of validity, or often known as content validity. The general concept of content validity is that the content of the test should measure the content of the objective or the topic itself. The third type is construct validity. Now, the easiest way to define the word construct is to think about the abstract nouns that we use in our daily lives. For example, love, intelligence, fluency, anxiety, etc., etc. Now, in order for a general term to become a construct, it must be measurable and have a relationship with other constructs. In construct validity, it tells us how well the test measures the concept it was designed to evaluate, and it intends to measure the general validity of a test. As I've said, in order for a term to be a construct, it should be measurable. So let's say, for example, fluency. So we have a lot of ways in measuring fluency. For example, in the ways of pronouncing the words, the lack of hesitation, the way they stutter, and many other ways. The second thing that I have mentioned a while ago is that it should have a relationship with other construct. Now, we use the example fluency. Now, in order for it to have a relationship with our construct, let us relate it to anxiety. Now, we can say that as the anxiety increases, the fluency decreases, and vice versa. In construct validity, we should ask the question, does this test actually tap into the theoretical construct as it has been defined? And now, we will be moving on to test usefulness. Bachman and Palmer have used the term usefulness as a superordinate in place of construct validity to include reliability, construct validity, authenticity, interactiveness, and practicality. So test usefulness is measuring how relevant our test is to our purpose and to our students. In order to measure a usefulness of a test, we should first consider its authenticity, its reliability, its interactiveness, and its practicality. Reliability refers to the consistency of test scores across facets of the test. Say for example, you administer an exam or a test to a class, and then administer that same test to that class in another time. If the scores in the previous test are similar to the recent test, then the test is reliable. Another example is administering the same test to two different groups. If those two different groups produce similar results, then the test is said to be reliable. Authenticity. Bachman and Palmer define authenticity as the degree of correspondence of the characteristics of a given language test task to the features of a target language task, and then suggest an agenda for identifying those target language tasks and for transforming them into valid test items. Authenticity determines whether or not the test applies situations that are present in the real-life scenarios of the test takers, with the purpose of letting the students realize that the topic or objective is actually useful in their daily lives. In authenticity, the language in the test is as natural as possible. The items are contextualized rather than isolated. The topics are meaningful, relevant, interesting for the learners or the test takers. In here, some thematic organizations to items is provided, such as through a storyline or episode. Tasks represent or closely approximate real-world tasks. Interactiveness. This refers to the degree to which the individual test taker's characteristics, such as language ability, background knowledge, and motivations, are engaged when taking a test. So here, we actually tap on the interests and abilities of the students in order for them to not get bored upon taking the said test. Practicality. The term is concerned with the test implementation rather than the meaning of the test scores. In practicality, our focus is how we implement or administer the assessment rather than the interpretation of the test scores. Chappell has characterized three approaches to validity. These are trait theory, new behaviorism, and interactionism. Trait theory. This approach considers that a trait is no different from the notion of a construct. It is assumed that the construct to be tested is an attribute of a test taker. In here, the test taker's knowledge and processes are assumed to be stable and real, and the test is designed to measure these. Score meaning is therefore established on the basis of the correspondence between the score and the actuality of the construct in the test taker. New behaviorism. In a behaviorist approach, The test score is mostly affected by context, such as physical setting, topic, and participants. These are typically called facets in the language testing literature. In real-life communication, we have this thing called context. Now, context is made up of the place where the communication is being held, the subject, and the people we interact. Now, those things that I have mentioned are the things or factors that affect the student's performance or their score. In the work of Tyrone, it is argued that the performance on the test tasks varies within individuals by task and features or facets of the task. She argues that the idea of a stable competence is untenable and that variable capability is the only defensible position. In other words, there are no constructs that really exist within individuals. Rather, our abilities are variable and change from one situation to another. Interactionism. Chappell describes that an interactionist understanding of a score meaning as a result of traits, contextual features, and their interaction, and says that performance is viewed as a sign of underlying traits and is influenced by the context in which it occurs, and is therefore a sample of performance in similar contexts. Pragmatic validity. Pragmatic validity is dependent upon a view that in language testing, there is no such thing as an absolute answer to the validity question, for the reason that validity theory itself is changing and evolving. So as the times change, the view and validity can also change. The role of the language tester is to collect evidence and support test use and interpretation that a larger community, the stakeholders, students, test takers, teachers, and society accept. But this truth may change as new evidence comes to life. According to Fish, disagreements are not settled by the facts, but are the means by which the facts are settled. Retroduction. It is the process in which the mind goes over all the facts of the case, absorbs them, digests them, sleeps over them, assimilates them, dreams of them, and then finally is prompted to deliver them in a form. In short, we interpret facts to make them meaningful, working from beginning to the end in order to produce an explanation.